One of the lessons I've learned in my time is that the upside generally takes care of itself. It's the downside you need to watch for and manage. So, while the markets are taking care of themselves on the upside, it's time to go back and look at the basics of the system I follow. And I've been using this system for over 30 years and it's served me well. But on this channel, I don't talk about myself much because some would not believe me and others might say I'm bragging. But for those that have been around for a while, you understand by now that it's not me that's important, it's the system. But you don't need to follow my system. What you need is a system. And once you find a system that works, follow the rules and don't deviate. And if you can do that with some patience and prudence, you'll have an edge. So let's sharpen that edge. So in the system that I use, I essentially look at three basic charts. A long-term chart, such as this one, which is the 20-year monthly chart. And if all looks good, I go to a weekly chart, and I'll use a 1, 2, 3, maybe even a 5-year chart, looking at the weekly basis. And then last, I'll go to the daily chart, usually on a 6-month basis. Now, we're going to take a look today at the iShares Russell 2000 ETF, and the symbol here, IWM, simply because the Russell is the last indice to be moving through its process. The NASDAQ and the Dow and the S&P are ahead, so I think it's a good time to take a look at this chart here. We see that it's bottoming and basing here. It has run up to, say, 196.43, but you still have plenty of time, in my humble opinion. And going all the way back here to 2009, it's been in a pretty decent uptrend. We have a couple of downtrends here, such as in 2020, but they solve themselves. Like this one, it's going to solve itself soon enough. Let's move on down. So what I take a look at now is volume. Volume is pretty stable for the last several years, so no reason to go any further in depth on that. And then into the MACD, which is my primary trigger. Now, simply looking at the MACD here, we have the current bottoming and basing. Not unlike here, even though this recovery was very steep, very fast. Again, we have a bottoming basing there in 2016. I'm not going to call this one here. This is a little odd. It took a little bit longer, but you could call that a bottoming and basing because it did have a nice move on up. Here, 2009 was very steep in its decline and then also in its ascent. So, back here to 2023, nice bottoming and basing with the fast line in black, about to move up and through the slow line in red. And once the fast line moves through that slow line, that's one of my primary triggers. And we're close enough to that zero line that, to me, it's not a bad bet because the upside is going to take care of itself. Moving through here into the histogram, pretty much the same thing, bottoming and basing. A nice move on up here with a little bit of hesitation at that point there. But we're almost near that zero line. Now, that doesn't mean jump in, but it does mean that most of the downside has taken care of itself. So now it's the upside. Here into the price rate of change, we can see that the fast line has already moved through the slow line on its way up. So a lot of these oscillators are going to look good, such as the RSI. It's at a moderate 58.09, but things are improving, definitely above that 50 or midline and heading on up. Same thing here with the stochastics, nice bottoming and basing, and now we have a run heading on up. And the Williams, same thing. Down here at the bottom, you had plenty of notice that things were improving. Now, the Williams is generally the quickest oscillator to move on up, so follow that, at least with the timing that I have it set at. It's in that negative 20 to 0 area, which is overbought, but it can stay in that overbought territory for a year or more. You can see plenty of examples here going all the way back. moving back up here to the price chart. So you can see that the oscillators are all telling you that things have improved. All right, so if you're satisfied that the stock or indice that you're looking at looks decent enough in the monthly chart, then we go to the weekly chart. And here in the weekly chart, and this is the 2-year weekly still on the iShares Russell 2000 ETF, you can see that the bottoming and basing has taken a long time moving through here and then finally moving on its way up. So perhaps in this area you may have decided to take a look at the Russell, but you could have bought it at any time here and you still can buy it. Things I'm looking at, I want to see if we move up and through that resistance level there, this resistance level here, this one here, this one here, and of course the final is that previous all-time high there. Now, you can do this in a stair-step manner looking at these resistance levels, or you can look at the oscillators. So let's go to the oscillators. Again, volume looks fine. Here in the MACD, this point here was the bottom in this particular oscillator, but you had other opportunities, say in these areas here where we did have a bit of a downtrend or consolidation, such as this consolidation here, and then the fast line moved on up through that slow line in red. So I use the weekly more as a timing indicator. If I like a particular stock or indice, I want to try to get the best price that I can. You might have missed this, you may have missed this, you may have missed this time as well, but here hopefully you didn't miss. We're getting near that zero line, and the closer to that zero line or above, the stronger the indice or the individual stock is. So once we cross this zero line, that's when you really see the sparks fly on the movement on up. Of course, the reverse is true on the downside. You got to watch that downside. Now, let's move here into the histogram. You see pretty much the same thing. Nice bottoming and basing, and then run on up. It looks like it's going to continue to accelerate, so that's why you don't have to watch the stock too much on the upside. It's going to take care of itself. The price rate of change looks good. I'd like to see us get a little bit higher here, but that's a pretty high level. I think we'll get to that level shortly, and at that point then you'll want to start to take a look to see if we have any downside potential. And that would be the same rule for every oscillator. When you get to previous highs, then you start watching out for any potential for a consolidation. Here into the RSI, we're at a nice 71.22. I'd like to see us get into that overbought territory above 80, and that would indicate that things are continuing on the upside. Now, if you are looking at this and are a little bit concerned about how high it has come or how far it's come, then you do want to take a moment or two and ask yourself, perhaps maybe I should be a little bit more patient, wait for this to roll over and to come back down under that 50 line and maybe take a shot at it at some point in the future. That's always possible because we're getting up here into that overbought territory, and as you can see in the last couple of years it hasn't spent too much time in these upper levels and it has come back down. So you can always wait for it to come back down. Same thing here in the Williams. Back on up here to the price chart, another quick look at that, and perhaps now is not the time to start buying this particular indice because this level here is going to have that resistance at this point, so it may turn back. You want to see if that's going to happen or how strongly it moves up and through. If it moves up and through relatively strongly, then perhaps you might want to take a position. But as usual, I always say that don't just drop all the money you have into that stock or indice. It's better to average in. If you were averaging in going way back here, you'd have a whole bunch of good prices on the way up. All right, So now if you're satisfied with the weekly chart, you go to the daily chart. And into the daily chart on the Russell 2000, we can see that we've had this nice bottoming and basing in this area here, and we've come up to this level. And so you may say to yourself, we're at this level here, which is pretty consistent to this level going back 6 months or so. So perhaps you might want to wait, be a little bit patient and prudent, simply because we're elevated above the 20 and the 50 EMAs. So definitely there's a possibility that this could roll over. If that's what you think, then just be patient. So move on down. Here, volume looks fine. And then you see in the MAC that the MAC is looking like it might be rolling over here, with the fast line maybe going to go through that slow line. The red is the slow line. Head on down and see if you have another bottoming and basing in the next month or two above zero, which would say that that indice or stock is strong. Wait for that bottoming and basing here in a month or two and then dive in. Of course, averaging in might be better. Moving through, you can see here in the histogram that the rollover has occurred, and it is moving on down at a fairly decent rate. So we're probably going to go negative here in the next week or two. Moving through, you see the price rate of change is also showing the possibility of a topping process. Into the RSI, it's at 63.67. That also is showing perhaps a topping process. Maybe it's going to go below that 50 or midline, and you can perhaps buy some more stock below that level there. Into the stochastics, again the same thing, and then the Williams also showing you that things might be weakening. Back up here to the price chart, and then you can see here. So just be a little bit patient, wait another month or two. To me, this is the 6-month daily chart, and the daily chart, I use it really to fine-tune either my sale or my purchase. You don't have to get so finite in the daily chart. Really, the most important, once again, is the monthly chart, and then I also like using the weekly chart, and then the daily is to fine-tune your decision. So that, in its simplicity, is my system, and I've followed it and I've done well. And so I would say good luck to you. And for ChewDog Charts, thank you.